Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends, and those who are at home, welcome to the LeadingSelf Coaching Café. So the Coaching Café is an opportunity for us to share ideas, converse, talk, debate about issues that we face in the workplace. Now, I want to welcome you here, those who are joining us physically. Please give yourself a round of applause, those who are here. And I want to also welcome those who are joining us via cell phones, TV at home, and their computers. I think it is beyond doubt that times are changing. Not so long ago, innovation was described in terms of a desktop computer. And that was like a big thing for us. If you think how the Macs of this world took over in the 80s and became the it thing. Then the Mac was replacing another innovation of the olden days, which was the typewriter. So, people who remember writing things, and I think some of those who are here today don't even know what that thing is. But the typewriter was an innovation in its own time. And now both the computer, as in, a desktop computer, and the typewriter have become obsolete. They've become technology of the past. Now we can do everything on our smartphones, powered by a sentient AI. Now we can bank, we can do so many things on our phones. The question is AI taking over? If you remember, in the early 2000s, we had the phase of robotics, where factories changed. And factories no longer had, workers. In fact, if you go to the Eastern Cape, East London, Mercedes-Benz, VW, those plants, you find machines doing work that were done by human beings. So the world of work is changing. Now, the biggest question I have for myself is, if robotics took over the manufacturing plant, what will AI do in terms of taking over the boardroom? Is AI taking over the boardroom? Is AI going to do the thinking, the strategy, and everything? So this is probably one of the reasons why we are gathered here today, not as a defensive mechanism, but to share ideas about what needs to be done in the phase of a changing and evolving world that we are in. So the topic for today is leading in the age of AI, and tech disruptions. Where is the human agency? I was talking to one of our panelists, Dr. Khoza, today, a week or so ago, and we're talking about, are we focusing on technology as an AI, or are we talking about the effect of technology to people? And I think for me, that is what brings us here today. It is the impact of technology to people. So without a waste of time, let me introduce our panelists who will share insights, and we can listen to some of the ideas that they have around this evolving world of work. Well, on my immediate left, we have a doyen of South African business, a leader of leaders, I call him. He is none other than Dr. Reuel Khoza. We know Dr. Khoza is a writer, he is a chairman of boards, and he's also a thinker and a contributor to the evolving space of leadership in the country. Let's give him a round of applause. Welcome, Dr. Khoza. Thank you, sir. Next to Dr. Khoza is a former colleague of mine at ABSA. So Gita joined ABSA as head of culture when we were at ABSA. And her interest, I suppose, lies in people. how we integrate systems and people to make sure that we have effective cultures in the workplace. I think she's the right person also to come and share ideas about AI and the workplace. Give her a round of applause. And then on the extreme left is a good friend of mine, Mr. Ajay Lalu. Ajay used to be, when I was at Extrata with another colleague who's here, Dale, and Ajay used to do a lot of planning around BEE for the mining industry at the time. But now he's transitioned. He's now into tech and is running startups that are impacting the tech world. And most of the work that he does is also in the AI space. So he's going to give us his ideas around what should be done in the moment that we are facing. Please give Ajay a round of applause. Let me start with Dr. Khoza. What are your thoughts on the emergence of AI? Do you think that AI is coming to change life and leadership as we know it?
In a real sense, I think it is going to inevitably change life as we understand it. It is as ubiquitous as it is intrusive. You can't avoid it. You can't get around it. It was started by humans, granted, but in certain respects, it's actually overtaking humans, even in terms of thinking. There are those amongst us who are pretenders to authorship. Now they work with AI co-piloting. You don't have to research as heavily as you did with paperwork. The temptation there is that if you rely on this, you get lazy and human thinking atrophies. If you were given to thinking like we were as traditionalists, and you no longer think, you allow the machine to do most of the thinking, you over-delegate to the machine or offload to the machine, human development will battle. It will retrogress. There are those who are already talking about the bizarro future, where machines will overtake humans to a degree where they almost dictate what humanity does. But then I think here we have to grapple with the idea of agency, human agency in AI. Now we have human agency in politics, but more often than not, we allow the politicians to take over our lives, and they're messing it up big time. Now AI, in one sense, will be no different. Now agency is essentially what the human individual will do to make sure that humans stay in control and make sure that AI, sophisticated as it may be, is a tool that serves humanity. It's a tool at the behest of humans. And that, in fact, will be the challenge of the near and far future. And the problem is that those who are likely to work a lot more closely with AI and control it to a much greater extent and make a lot more money and render a number of humans redundant or make them mere cogs in a productive machinery might actually be overcome by greed. So make a lot of money, but what do you do following that? Are you going to be philanthropic? Are you going to care about significant and insignificant others, or will you be self-serving and behave in the bizarre manner of some of the things that we do, we see done by corrupt people, who got easy money. You buy Lamborghinis and machinery of that ilk, same color, same just about everything, but buy them just because you can, and forget about caring, forget about sharing, forget about caring about humanity beyond self. So I think those are the kinds of things we'll have to grapple with if you serve on a given board. How do you allow the unfettered usage of AI? Recently I gathered that McKinsey has had to do away with quite a number of their employees rendered redundant by AI. Now, do you make sure that, in fact, you don't do away with humans? You grow the cake such that just about everybody has a stake in it. This will, in fact, be the biggest challenge going forward.
Wow. And you touch on a very interesting point for me, because I think there's a correlation between the speed of AI implementation and loss of jobs. And debate currently is centered around, I suppose, fear that this potentially could be a reality in the next 5 to 10 years, where people will still large numbers of. Do you think, where you sit, Doc, that in essence AI is coming to replace the workforce in companies? Do you see that as a real threat as we sit here today?
Replace some, perhaps a substantial chunk of humanity. But what I think we can do to forestall that and introduce a greater balance is if we design our curricula such that they can actually optimally utilize AI, as opposed to the kinds of deficient human models that we lately produce, who come out of university and somehow there's a big mismatch between them and the world of work. If the world of work is going to be dominated by AI, we had better introduce how best to grapple with AI at our tertiary institutions. And so that when people come out, they don't fear these things. They find ways of, harnessing and utilizing AI as a tool at the disposal of humanity.
Okay. Thank you, Doc. Thank you so much. Gita, you have led culture transformations in various organizations, including our former employer ABSA and the Reserve Bank as well, where you worked. What is the impact of AI on culture? Are we seeing a change in human behavior because of AI?
Wow, that's such a deep question. And I think maybe just to put on the table a perspective that I'm really trying to shape around decision making is we can't just think about AI as a technology. We also need to look at what's happening in terms of economy. We need to look at geopolitics. And we also need to look at psychodynamics. And when we talk about culture, what is culture, whether it's in an organization or outside, you might remember me speaking about this in the days, but culture really is just about what we see, what we do, and what we feel and believe. And so that captures a whole range of very dynamic factors happening in society right now. And what I would say for me is interesting is, what are the cultural practices in the modern workplace that support effective decision-making and leadership, and what are the practices that undermine and erode that? And so for me, I don't feel AI is a unique technology. I do think it's dialing up aspects of workplace culture that are not productive, that I think we need to take a purposeful look at. And I really like how, Doc mentioned being intentional about what we want this technology to do. I do think there's a role for the Global South to come together and say, well, who is defining what intelligence in AI means? What does that mean? What would that look like from a Global South perspective on a values basis? Would we even call this thing artificial intelligence? What would we call it? So there are a lot of cultural biases already in the way the narrative is being shaped about AI. And, I think in order to enable effective decision making, we have an obligation to surface what's happening in the narrative here. So just to kind of conclude that on an economic standpoint, because I follow the technology, it's an interesting one, I follow the technology quite closely. I'm really fascinated at, for example, the valuation of an open AI where they don't have a route to profitability. They have zero business case. Imagine Black leaders, Black entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs came up with business idea where operating costs are, 800 million, and really on your business plan you can only show you're selling at most 200 million. So I'm interested in the economics of what is it that allows us as business leaders, as companies, as boards, as stock markets, to take this thing as a fait accompli and then to reward it through financial systems. And then that has a history as well. I'm looking at the geopolitics. So this is largely a global north-driven thing, and they're feeling entitled to define the rules of the narrative. So they get to define what intelligence is, et cetera, and so on and so forth. And then at the psychodynamic level, and this is what brings it back to culture, I would say I don't think current workplace cultures, and having been in this field for my entire career, but being a sociologist by background, I don't believe current workplace cultures globally are well set up for leaders to make well-considered decisions in this regard. So I do think AI could become a runaway train only because we've unconsciously, we've given up the narrative to others. We're not asking critical questions around to whom does this add value, who gets to shape the narrative. And really, for me, because as a South African and on the continent, what's in it for Africa? And we can't say, well, let's take the technology they're designing and find applications for it. No, we need to go further back and say the way it's being designed is shaped by cultural biases, perspectives, epistemology that's not from here. And we mustn't just take these tools and say, how do we apply it? I think we need to actually be a bit more reflective about how do we want to build these tools in a way that works for us here. I don't have a lot of optimism, though, Gugu, around the current state of workplace cultures, the lack of psychological safety within teams, the lack of open dialogue. And I'm sure those of you who've worked in these organizations, it'll sound really familiar what I'm mentioning. There's a real mistrust of dissenting views. Having been a group head of culture, I've seen how people respond to differences of opinion as though that is conflict. That's not conflict. So for me, I think there's a lot of work to be done inside organizations to create conditions for real engagement about what does this mean for us.
Yeah, you raise a very important point around who is carrying the narrative. So I was watching a program on, YouTube has now become the SABC of the old days. So I was watching a program on the penetration of AI across the world. And there was a picture they showed where there's darkness on the continent. It's like electricity. There's darkness on the continent and in the Western world, and now more so in the Eastern world, there's beginning to be AI penetration. But the people who are feeding the AI machine in terms of educating the machine are on the African continent. So they're used to describe shapes, names of animals. Is there an exploitation that is beginning to happen around?
I would say absolutely. There is an exploitation happening, and if we had to try and say what frameworks can we use to try and understand the complex dynamics we're being caught up in with this technology, I would say it's a new form of imperialism. And so you have global South workers working for below poverty wages, doing grunt work around data capturing. There's the other side of it, which is social media. Trust and safety teams are poorly paid women in the Philippines who have to watch videos of violence and sexual abuse and all of that and code these things in order to be able to flag them. That's a human in the loop, and at great expense in terms of psychological trauma, etc. So the global South is still playing that old role of being mined and exploited for resources, labor, etc., but without the beneficiation, right? It's like taking the gold and diamond, sending it somewhere else. They make something higher value out of it and sell it. That's happening now. That's already happened with AI. I don't think it's going to happen. It's already been documented by people who are very close to what's happening there. And I think this is where we need global South leaders and business leaders and boards and chairs to actually say we don't buy that narrative that's coming at us. I think also this word of progress, so the darkness on the continent, that's a narrative. That's not a truth. It's not a truth. And in fact, who gets to define what progress looks like? Again, that's a very Western colonial inheritance around this linear progress forward continually, which goes against everything we know on this continent, in our society, and in our cultures. It goes against everything we know. And so AI, I'm suspicious of the narrative, because the narrative is being controlled by those who are profiting the most from it. And then I'd like to share one thought that I'm playing around with. And please allow me to just say it, and then maybe over time I'll get better at articulating it. But I've been wondering, what is happening psychodynamically in society and organizations around AI? And then you asked me the role of AI in the workplace. So one of the key, I think, fundamental struggles people have in organizational culture is that it's an internalization of hyper-masculine ways of showing up. We can define that later. We can talk about what that means. But I'm playing around with an idea, looking at the data and reading through the narrative, that in some ways I think this specter of AI and the way the West is making this into a polarized issue of will AI take over the world, how will we keep humanity safe? I think that's a false dichotomy already to begin with. But I actually wonder if what we're seeing around AI is actually a crisis of white male fragility in a post-colonial world.
Interesting. Thank you. Wow. Thank you. I suppose, Ajay, you work in that space. I mean, you will be able to tell us if there's a bit of fragility, not only probably white males in general, but you drive a tech organization, QHOP. I mean, it's now, what do you call them now when they get into $1 billion?
No, we're nowhere near unicorn, but I like the thinking. Believe me, I like the thinking.
Yeah, so what has been the impact of AI in your company, and how big will this impact be in the future?
I suppose in this panel, I'm not only sitting deliberately on the far left, I may be the far leftist in the AI debate and discussion. So I think that, so let me firstly contextualize what QHOP does, right? I think it's important to understand.
Yeah.
So imagine walking into a Woolworths store, opening up an app on your mobile phone, and as you're walking through the aisles, scanning the barcodes of things you want to buy. As you scan it, it pulls up the price, etc. It can show you promotions on that item. It can show you, recommendations like you do when you do online shopping, reviews, etc. At the end, when you're done, you take your basket of things, you put it onto a little kiosk. It's got an IoT scale. We validate what you've scanned versus what's physically there. So in other words, you can't scan one Coke and put two in the basket. We pick it up. Because we come from South Africa, you have to think in a particular paradigm. Once we validate, we allow you to pay in the app using any digital payment platform that exists today. From PayPal to Bitcoin to Zapper, SnapScan, doesn't matter to us. Once you pay, you pack your goods and you leave the store. So And it was developed actually in the heart of COVID, right? In a time when that need was so pervasive. It's evolved and pivoted over time into something which is now enables autonomous retail checkout. So you could have an entire store without a checkout process because you check out yourself. And so AI in our solution is quite pervasive, right? We use AI in a number of different ways. One, we believe this age of advertising is over, okay? So all of us drove, let's say, at least 3 kilometers to get to this venue tonight. And within that 3 kilometers, there must be at least 20 adverts that you passed. Can you remember a single one of those adverts? Okay. Proves my point, right? But if I was shopping in a Woolworths and I'm scanning a loaf of bread, right? This AI engine knows when I buy bread, 9 out of 10 times I'm also buying, milk, right? So it can then prompt me to say, listen, you last bought milk 3 days ago, 5 days ago, you need milk again. So the intelligence, the AI hyper-personalization engine personalizes promotions to me and what I buy, when I buy it, how frequently I buy it, what do I buy most frequently with that item, and so forth. And no store, even, I grew up in the Cape, right? The bubby on the corner that knows me, knows my family, knows the history and provides credit, doesn't know that I buy a pie and a Coke every Friday, right? This system will know that, and it will prompt you for a discount that's only available to you. Nobody else in the store will have that discount. Potentially nobody else in the country has the same discount. So this age of hyper-personalization that's unique to you, it's when the demographic kind of representation of advertising. We look at, 40 to 50-year-old males. We say, this is what they buy. This is what the discounts we're going to give them in this month because that's what they bought for the last 50 years is over. Okay? So there are a number of other examples of how we use AI. So we track shopper behavior, right? So we look at you and your shopper behavior. If you always buy cool baked beans and you suddenly shift to no-name baked beans, the system picks that up. And it then will prompt you to say, when you're checking out, let's make sure that he's actually buying no-name baked beans and not scanning the no-name baked beans and putting the cool baked beans because, by the way, they weigh the same. But they come at different price points, right? So that's how you can use AI to validate shopper behavior, risk that the retailer faces, and give the shopper something which is dynamic, unique, and what they want, when they want it, at the point of decision making in the aisle, as opposed to when they walk outside the store before they walk into the store. Nobody remembers any adverts.
Interesting. I mean, I think the point you, if I'm hearing you correctly, the point you're making is that AI can be an enabler. AI can help us to become better decision makers in terms of what we are looking for, in terms of what we're getting. Am I reading you?
You're absolutely right. We built this solution 100% in South Africa by South Africans. Okay. And I think there was a very important lesson when we set out to build the solution. And we set out to say, how do we enhance the human experience? Okay. It's not the other way around. Okay. Technology has and must, in my opinion, be an enabler of better experience, of freeing up time, of doing things in a more efficient way, so that I can spend more time in the gym or running or traveling or enjoying life, right?
Or in your case, walking on the ocean or at Sea Point.
Absolutely.
Awesome. No, I think Dr. Khoza raised a very important part around laziness. Whether then when we are full-blown AI the human mind is just literally going to fry itself because it's just sitting too much on the sun. It's just enjoying, and so, do you think, Ajay, that, that's potentially one of the dangers that we've subcontracted thinking to a machine?
Absolutely. There's a legal case at the moment where there was an advocate that was arguing a case in front of a judge and was quoting a ChatGPT generated legal precedent case, right?
Travesty.
It's an absolute travesty. We've handed over our intellectual capability and capacity to ChatGPT. Now, when we get to that level of laziness, and I'm being very deliberate in choosing my words here. When we get to that level of laziness, that we're not even checking, fact-checking, I think we're doomed, quite frankly, right? But I also think, Gita raises some very interesting points around the fact that we have young people in our society today that are experiencing incredible levels of anxiety because all they do is this, right? And I think we need to find ways of engaging young people to say, technology is an enabler. It can't be the thing that rules your life. It can't be the thing that when I want to seek relationship advice, I must go to this device. When I want to find...
Dr. Google.
Yeah, and when I want to find a partner, this is the device that helps me find that partner, right? But what's more interesting and what's more scary is I don't think we actually understand or realize how powerful AI already is, okay? So there's a prompt, and I don't have the exact words, but essentially what the prompt asks is, based on my engagements with you, ChatGPT, please tell me characteristics about myself that I may not know about, okay? Now, when you ask that question, and it can give you an answer, it's not only looking at what you are asking and scouring the internet like we think it does, it's actually inferring human psychological characteristics to you based on what you ask and what prompts you say, actually, I prefer this option or I prefer this option, right? That's scary.
Could I jump in?
Yes, please jump in, Gita.
I would just say, whoa. we need to slow down the conversation a bit. So I'm not a Luddite. I love tech. I've followed tech for over 25 years very closely. I've been involved in fintech disruption, etc. So I'm not someone saying technology is the problem. What I'm interested in is the human-technology interface and the way the narrative is being shaped. So just the attention economy, any young person struggling with anxiety, etc., is no match for Facebook, Meta, and Instagram, because they've mobilized deep science and technology around persuasive design, is how they called it 15 years ago, to get the dopamine hit and to get people addicted. So we're doing exactly what this is the designed outcome, I think, is what I want to say, right? Is like, let's not be under any illusion. These are not the glitches and the bugs of the technology, and let's try and align everybody and move them to a better place. No. These are the designed outcomes. And so the opportunity that I think we need to ask, well, firstly, I think we need to question what is meant by AI, because I think there's a lot of, it's very opaque. And I think at board level and in organizations, we throw the word AI around. Are we talking about advanced statistics? Because actually, we've been running chatbots on that for decades, on advanced statistics. But, people like to hear you describe it as AI. So what is the technology? What's actually going on? And the programming of the current LLMs, and ChatGPT being one of the largest, has adopted a kind of a persuasive psychology speak that's very fawning and sycophantic and really replicates what's expected of us in corporate culture. That's how we're meant to treat our leaders. We're meant to say, no, fabulous idea. You want to do that? You want to drive the car off the bridge? Inspirational. And have you noticed that's how ChatGPT engages with us? It's got a fawning attitude. That is a programmed outcome. This is not accidental. This is not sentience. None of it. It's the application of statistics around language models. But it's actually reflecting what I find interesting, because I'm also interested in the history. It's reflecting to such a large extent key personalities in the development of these technologies, individuals who are shaping the way these technologies play out. Can you get ChatGPT or any other AI to admit that it lied to you? You can't. You can't. Right? That's the way it's programmed. It's the constant fawning and supplication. And that's about how we're being trained to relate to power and authority. Conditioned.
Yeah. Thanks, Gita. Thank you so much. Colleagues, we're going to open this to questions. So please prepare your questions, how you, be as bold as anything. And let me invite some of our friends who are outside. There's chairs here. Please come in. Please come in, Stelo. Please come in, guys.
Google, can we ask the audience not to use ChatGPT to ask us questions?
Thank you. Okay, so no, thank you, Doc. I think the proverbial can has been opened in a way to really deal. So there's the politics of AI. There's the corporatization of AI. There's also issues of socialization of AI. So it touches different spaces. But in your assessment, what does human agency mean in an era of rapid automation? What becomes for you, as you watch, as I said earlier when we started, that you've written a lot on leadership and you've observed people, you've observed boards. What becomes the human agency as we move forward?
I think the human agency becomes the individual and the individual's prerogative not to over-defer. You can refer to the machine and to AI, referring, no big problem, but deferring to it, you begin to give it human status. And I think that's where agency, in as much as I said, agency in politics and agency in AI, is the individual decision to say, this actually helps capacitate me to operate more efficiently. But it's not going to turn around and own me. I continue to own it. Now, that goes to the issue of conscience. I mean, if you're talking about the bank, for instance, which is one area I've spent almost all of my life.
Yes.
When does AI, and its name is artificial intelligence, get to supervise, to supersede natural intelligence? Some youngsters actually did ask, why do you come in? Why do you bother to come here and inundate me with artificial intelligence? I want real intelligence. So make a distinction between that. Imbue your leadership with conscience.
Yeah.
Render your bank a conscientious corporate citizen that cares about humans a lot more than it cares about profit. Because excessive dalliance with profit lead you to a situation of plunder. And that's what we have to, as humans, be cautious about. Not allow this machinery to actually reduce us to plunderers. But remain conscientious in a manner that says we are in charge, not the machine, and we'll instruct the machine to help us, but help us in a manner that is not inimical to humanity. And that is predicated on a value system.
Yeah.
So what we do in some bank that I'm associated with is to regularly debate the issues. Work with those at the cutting edge of the technology itself, and work with those who philosophically and in terms of caring about humanity are on the other extreme. And we want to believe that the engagement and the debate will actually help us strike a balance.
The right chord. And you talk about balance, and for me, one of the key determiners of balance in that context is rooted on the word ethics.
Yeah.
And ethical consideration. Do you think, as you observe, that there's a balance or a dynamic relationship between ethics and innovation in terms of where we are?
There may not be, particularly in a foggy area where your political leadership, right at the top, is almost totally without conscience. Where, in terms of their leadership, over sort of a decade, they moved from thieving with a bit of a conscience to prebendalism, which actually deliberately says, I'll take care of myself and my own.
Yeah.
And now is deteriorated to kleptocracy, which is sort of almost governance by stealing. So for so long as we allow ourselves as humanity to degenerate to that sort of level, and where our youngsters are concerned, not imbue them with a sense of ethics that says there is such a thing as a distinction between right and wrong, between good and bad. And this actually went out the window when we said we are a secular state. We're not Christian, we're not Islamic, we're just secular. But what worried one where ethics is concerned was out went the ethical conduct thrust. Because we didn't replace Christianity or religion with moral education, if you like. We wait until people have become almost incorrigible, and then we say, let's try moral regeneration. Now, I think where proper leadership is concerned, we will make sure that before moral regeneration, there is moral generation as part of the socialization. And so you spoke about ethics. Most companies, for my sins, I'm also part of the Institute of Directors. And we advocate that with all of the other things that a director should actually be doing, because, you got to be profitable. That's essential because that's how you survive. We insist that good directors should be ethical, for one thing. They must also be competent. But and competence alone doesn't help. There's nothing more dangerous than a competent thief. So you need a combination of ethical conduct and competence. And then flowing out of that, you need, you lead to what we've been advocating as integrity. And integrity presupposes, things like responsibility and accountability and fairness and transparency. But the first two pillars will be your competence and ethical conduct. So a good number of the companies that refer and defer to King 3 in all its manifestations. Now we have King 5. We'll be launching it very, very soon. It's this issue of ethics. But in order for ethics to take real root, it's got to be a national challenge. It's got to be a national preoccupation. So where my colleagues are concerned, where AI is concerned, I'm a bit concerned. I was born long before. I'm 76 now. I'm just a fossil of an era gone by. But Ajay, I was very impressed with you saying that what you took us through, that gadget, is manufactured in South Africa and I hope patented in South Africa. My biggest problem now is that in our education, we don't emphasize the importance of technology that much. We wait until South Korea comes up with something smashing.
It's an interesting point you make, right? And I'm almost an advocate that we are wasting our time teaching our kids how to code. Because actually, that device can code faster than a room full of coders today. I can create an app in 90 seconds by simply providing a problem and asking it. And by the way, the code is 90% accurate. So it may not be the most efficient code writing, but it will work. And so I think what we need to be doing is teaching young people critical problem or creative problem solving skills, right? Because I think that's the kind of skill. There'll always be a human in the loop. I can't envisage a scenario where human thinking and strategy and problem solving is absent and absconded to the machine, right? I think what we've got to teach young people is when we're in a township. I grew up in a very impoverished area. But in that, there are a plethora of challenges in everyday life. And so when we created QHop, it literally came to me one day standing in a shower. I said, what are all the things I hate about shopping? Let me solve all those things that I hate about shopping. I hate standing in queues. That's my first thing. I hate it. I hate not being able to find what I'm looking for, etc., etc. So all those things that I hate. I hate touching a keypad. Ooh. I'm a bit of a germaphobe. But and I think therein lies the ability. But what we were taught at school, and I came out of the 80s and 90s student movement, right? We were taught how to think critically, how to question. We were taught to not subject ourselves to the absolute authority, right? That you can actually challenge. And we were taught many other skills that I think is lacking in today's youth. And I think if we are to leapfrog the Koreas and the Indias and wherever else, China even for that matter, I think we need to start thinking differently. Because the coding, they'll beat us hands down with the coding. Without a doubt.
Yeah.
I think we've got to think about how do we use their product and actually leapfrog it, if it's possible.
Yeah, no, 100%. Thanks for that, Ajay. Gita, I mean, governance is a big thing. Having been, at the heart of corporate South Africa. Let me even be specific. What governance structures do you think, as you think about technology? I mean, we've had technology for years. It's not like, now we're scared about AI as if we've never had technology. But what governance structures do you think needs to be primary in our thinking when we are unleashing this beautiful beast?
I think that question is so central to being able to run accountable institutions. It's about how do we expect leaders to show up. Governance, we have to separate it. It's not the same thing as compliance. So it's not enough to have a whistleblowing line, for example, or that type of thing. Governance, I think the type that's needed, not just to deal with the challenge of this new technology and everything around it. Again, capital flows going into technologies instead of building infrastructure in Africa. We're not solving major societal problems. We're investing in cryptocurrency, right? This is a really interesting process that the West is detaching from the real world and detaching from accountability. So what do leaders here in the global South need to do in terms of governance? I think they need to ensure they've developed the relational skills and ability to surface from out of awareness into awareness what's actually shaping our conversation here, and how can we get a diversity of views into the room. So in this context, an absolute fundamental non-negotiable of governance has to be diversity in the room, diversity of perspective, to be able to also help shape what's the outcome we're hoping to achieve with this technology. Governance needs to also be asking the question, not what are we going to do with this technology? That's the last question you should ask. Governance should be really being disciplined about saying, again, what are the outcomes we want to have in terms of environment, society, health of democracy, active citizenry, whatever it is. What's the outcome we want? How might this technology enable that outcome? Rather than the tail wagging the dog. I think that's a governance role. It's about bringing a level of discernment, a level of balanced thinking, not buying into the hype. I think what really concerns me about C-suite level discussion on this topic is the evangelical nature of the dialogue. We're not having a rational discussion anymore then. And I think for leaders at that level to say, what do we mean by AI? How does it work? Are we talking about LLMs? Are we talking about advanced statistics? What is this thing being asked to do? Down to that level, we need to make this a lot more transparent. So governance is about giving effect to ethics by bringing in those perspectives.
In fact, to your point, I think the conversation in many boardrooms or senior, rooms where the big thinkers sit, it's a race question in terms of how behind are we with AI instead of what is this thing.
And just to bring it back to some of my earlier points, to present this issue as the control of the narrative from the global north and a few companies, to present it as a race, firstly, or to present it as an issue of whether machines are taking over. We have to be extremely skeptical and critical of what that's driving towards, because it serves particular interests of those organizations to become the ones who get to decide what's good for all of us. Right? And how do we prevent the technology from it's not going to take over. There's never in the history of humankind been any technology that was inevitable. It was all the outcome of human decision-making, choice, and intention. That's sociological research and historical research. There's no such thing as inevitable technology. And we should be suspicious of those narratives, because in my reading of it, I think it's a way of cloaking not wanting to take accountability for the outcomes.
Awesome. Awesome.
Kuku, can I just add to that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a very interesting discussion for two reasons. One, I think that when we look at the SALT at a global level on diversity and inclusion, I think it's deliberate. I think we mustn't fool ourselves to believe that this is one man's kind of perspective of his world, right? I think it's a deliberate, coordinated attack. And I think it results in an outcome which then starts to determine what is the gospel truth, according to ChatGPT or Copilot.
Or Grok.
Oh, yeah. And what's not, right? And I think we mustn't fool ourselves to believe that the exclusion of people in this room and others with the different hue and complexion, gender and so forth, right, is not deliberate. The second thing that I think is, it's interesting societal kind of reaction to AI. In an age of digitization and digital and so forth, there's a genuine movement back to analog. So you think about the vinyl. I mean, I have a stack of 400 vinyls, actually, which I listen to regularly. But I also have a collection of about 60 or 70 analog cameras, right? And so there's this movement back to analog. I mean, at the end of the day, humans, by their very nature, are social creatures. We need connection, right? And so I think at some level, in the race for technology, somebody's going to differentiate themselves in an industry obsessed with this race to be the best, the number one technology innovative company, right? To actually go back to the human, actually. Let me serve you, okay?
In fact, I was going to ask you whether, how do companies, begin to include human-centric values in innovation, in technology? How do we, in essence, or is it something that becomes an agenda issue, or is it something that potentially we just need to evolve automatically?
I don't think it evolves automatically. I think Doc is right? That actually this is a leadership issue. That when we engage with the concepts of innovation, of AI and technology from the boardroom, from the strategy, I think it needs to be driven and led by what do we want to achieve in an outcome. I think what Gita alluded to earlier, right? What is that outcome? Because a technology must serve. A technology cannot usurp, okay? It must serve. And I think there's a group of people out in the world that believes and are enabling or trying to enable technology that will usurp. And I think we must guard against that. As society, I think it's our obligation to guard against that. Because where do you draw the line? And the line is becoming increasingly difficult to identify, firstly, but secondly, we also hand over this control. We hand over our identity, our belonging, our culture, everything to a machine. And the minute that happens, I do think as a society, we're going to have to reconfigure who we are, what we are, how do we engage with each other and with the machine, right?
Yeah. Gita, before Gita's comments, colleagues, if there are any questions and comments, lovely. Gita, and then we'll go to the audience.
I think we are poised at exactly the right moment for Global South leaders to start making their voices heard, that we are going to be engaging as critical participants with technology, and we are going to be investing in resources to develop platforms and LLMs across Global South territories, imbued with our understanding and nuances and diversity and perspectives and values. Because the technology is sufficiently advanced for alternative LLMs to be developed elsewhere. I mean, we can each do that individually for ourselves already. But I think to see this as an opportunity for the global South to not just be a space where the West comes to extract resources like before. We say no, actually, and we're going to now, buyer beware as consumers of the technology. Listed company leaders are going to say, hang on, how are we doing this? What biases are we perhaps holding that are causing us to make certain decisions here? So this is the role of governance and ethical leadership. What are the biases here? Are we aware of the unintended consequences and harm? All of these things. So this is the language of impact, and it's the language of social connection, social cohesion. It's not the language coming from the center of the AI empire, which is really about unfettered scale and growth. Right? That's what's driving that in terms of that logic. And that really doesn't have our best interests at heart.
Awesome. Let's open it up. Dale, I see you have
a question. And it's more to you, Ajay. From a practical point of view, we've seen lots of money thrown at AI. And there's also been lots of failures. And the only ones that seem to be successful or sustainable are the ones that address a problem with technology that is linked to some sort of human interface or human oversight of something. So it's a monitoring solution in mining spaces, for example. Where is it safe? Where is it not safe? But sensors all over, it'll pick it up. But it's solving a problem that is unique to that company or unique to an industry that then comes and says, but we can do this better. But there's a human interface that still says, is that signal that I'm getting correct? Yes, no, etc. And then do some action about it. Is that not perhaps where that leadership comes in? Is only a thing that works sustainably is going to be successful. And, designing something new, you say you design an app on LLM, okay, great. And then 2 minutes later, I could design another one and I can do it cheaper because, so now we race to this bottom, but what are we actually solving? Nothing. So is that not perhaps where the leadership comes in, is that you're solving or attempting to solve a problem sustainably that is unique to an industry, and then that's how we drive it forward?
Look, there are a number of questions in there embedded in that question, right? I think the first thing is that there's a space and a place for technology. I have no doubt about that, because it can do things that the human is incapable of doing. So I just use my street, right? We put up these fancy AI cameras. It detects something which is an anomaly, but it then transfers that footage to a human, and the human will then check to say, oh, actually, I know this guy lives there, he's maybe black, but that's okay, he's in the right place at the right time, right? And I think that's important, right? That the technology must do certain things, but it can't make a decision. Otherwise, I'd be in handcuffs many times, etc., etc. The second point that I want to make around sustainability and leadership, right? I'm concerned at the leadership, particularly in our country, and in many organizations. We defer as a board to the chief investment officer, the chief data officer, the chief technology officer, that's going to build all our solutions in AI, right? We hand over as a board to someone, right? And I think we need to have checks and balances in place in that, firstly. But if you don't understand what are we solving, what are we doing, what is the outcomes, etc., right? This goes unchecked. And then we have the kind of issues and problems that we've seen in certain organizations where they're building things which I think are either inherently biased or are not achieving outcomes, but have spent millions, sometimes tens and twenties and hundreds of millions, developing something that we think is solving a problem, but actually nobody's tested. Is this a real problem? How are we going to solve this problem? And how, more importantly, do we get a return on this investment, right? So I do think that at a leadership level, and in the composition of boards in particular, that we need to look at the skills that we have that can provide sufficient oversight to whomever we're outsourcing this to, whether it's McKinsey or whether it's your chief investment officer, whomever, right? There needs to be a proper oversight. And questions, hard questions, or the tough questions need to be asked at that level.
Awesome. Any other comment, question, Nani?
My name is Loaz Mboni. I'm in the government sector. I'll just put it like that. My question would be, do you think AI, maybe it's for Doctor, do you think AI is the right approach for, addressing unemployment in the country? As we know that we've got a high unemployment rate. And then when we bring this approach where we're using AI, perhaps it's a good approach for the corporates and stuff. But for government and, would that AI actually address or increase, the employment rate for our youth? As we all know that there's a lot of people who've actually obtained degrees and qualifications and sitting at home, but they find no space in the market. I think that's my question. Thank you.
I think that's seated at the center, the nub of the AI challenge. I think our starting point should be this wave of technology. Is it a tide that you can stop? And the answer is you can't, because it actually makes things a lot more manageable for many. Now, how should you react to it? You've got to find ways of harnessing it to do your bidding. Gita, at the beginning, somewhere during our conversation actually said, start with the end in mind. What kind of society do we want to be? And that's the best way to provide your leadership. Now, AI you can't get around it. It's so ubiquitous. You can't stop it. It's such a strong wave. But how can you harness it? And harnessing it means, in fact, you become even a lot more productive and thereby create more jobs. But the human creativity has got to intervene. There's a fair bit to use even in farming, a fair bit of artificial intelligence. But in my case, for instance, the family business that I run, I have not retrenched anybody in 5 years, 7 years. Essentially because I use what AI, and there are people who understand that better in my farm, on my farm. Whatever it is you do it for the greater good. And that is the leadership challenge. But realize that, I don't know, I would like to quote somebody, but I can't remember the name. Have the wisdom to distinguish between what you can change and what you cannot. And what you can change, and there's a lot that we can change in South Africa, provided the leadership is enlightened, it is also sophisticated. Because we're going to deal progressively with complexity. And our leadership must be the kind of leadership that can deal with complexity without being perplexed. But a good number of our leaders they're just perplexity.
They're shocked.
Shocked even by things that shouldn't be shocking. So there is a sense in which this generation has got to, even as we encourage people to be elected to be our leaders, we must factor in AI in an intelligent manner that says, if you want to lead me, have an understanding of this and how it is applied. And if you can't do that, don't pretend to be my leader. So in other words, we have to proscribe and prescribe. And if we, as the intelligentsia, can't do that, God forbid. So AI can be used to optimize as opposed to render irrelevant. Or it will take charge of us via greedy folks. And if that happens, God forbid.
Thank you, Doc. Gita, you wanted to say something before we go to Nani?
I wanted to add to this
The mic,
point.
yeah.
I just wanted to add to this point, and it comes back to when you spoke about workplace culture, why I'm not feeling optimistic about our capabilities inside the workplace to really navigate this discussion is because I would say over the last 30 years of my career, I've observed a real anti-intellectual and ahistorical context in the way C-suite and leaders discuss issues of great importance. So it's considered almost like the worst insult you could get in a corporate context to say that that's really academic or conceptual or intellectual. That's a subtle dig at people wanting to actually probe, how did we get to this valuation of ideas or this direction? So I think that's I would love to see role modeling at a business leadership level where they say, can we bring history in? It's not the first time this has ever happened. Can we actually not position ourselves as anti-intellectuals? Can we actually be curious and use that as a way to drive decision-making for the collective good? So those things, it's not just about, can a technology provide a job? What's the context of the workplace? And the last thing is, in the time of my career, which coincides with the global expansion of neoliberalism as a way of doing private sector business, you don't hear companies talking about sustaining livelihoods as a key reason for being. Why not?
Yeah. Nani? Yeah.
I must say, Dr. Khoza has given a preamble to what I was asking myself, if it's a question or a remark. But, and by the way, Dr. Khoza, I speak as an entrepreneur. I hope that my quest in my journey is not that of rushing to buy a Lamborghini, but to make a difference before getting to a Lamborghini, as you have said. And having ventured into the space of technology, I think our generation, and I'm speaking as someone with parents who had been right in the thick of things with apartheid, the struggle, for freedom and democracy. That was the revolution then. And I think we should start looking at technology, AI, the digital world, whatever you may want to call it, as our new revolution. So I believe that every generation has its own cause. And for me, this is our cause. And I like what you said, Gita, just now, actually, that we have been consumers, and it talks back to what you spoke about, that the continent being dark and everywhere else being illuminated with AI. We have been consumers of everything else that comes from the West as Africa, and yet this is where they extract everything that they used to develop everything else that we go back to buy, right? And I am of the view that we have to be bold as entrepreneurs, as leaders, as just an African people, to develop and write our own script and narrative and take it out there. And this comes now to what AI is. We cannot, Dr. Khoza said just now, we cannot wish it away. it's here. Culture is not static; it evolves, and we have to evolve. We have to take, or else we might as well just switch off and go to the graves. So in evolving, we cannot be scared of being curious and digging deep into this thing so that we can find ourselves in them and be able to contribute to the global world with our own story and not having been dictated as to how it should go. So as an entrepreneur, for instance, I think someone did mention here in the panel that you, for instance, what we do is zoom into industries where we think we can make a difference with technology. I'll just give a quick
Nana,
a quick example. And I'm hoping that I'm hoping that Dale is listening because he could be my client soon. We've got people buried under the mines, and no one can go and take them out. Lily's mine and all of that. But what are we doing with technology to avoid such things happening? And it's not the only mine, I believe. There are other mines where there are people buried. So what we do is, for instance, provide a solution where we do an accident reconstruction, maybe for your insurances, but also training for your miners who may not even be literate enough to be taken to a class where there's someone, but they need to get into some cubicle where there's AI and the mine is constructed exactly as it is and they are trained. So there are so many solutions that we can do and take boldly as Africans and not be scared of AI. And as for ChatGPT, I believe that garbage in, garbage out. So it's what you feed it. I was telling my brother, ChatGPT is now my therapist. And I
Thank you, Nana. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We are now getting to that stage where we are wrapping up, colleagues. I wanted to move to the space of responsibility because I think one of the things that decision makers need to grapple with is responsibility, accountability, for decisions that are being made. What responsibilities, Doc, do you think leaders need to have or take towards workers and communities in particular, that are facing this automation coming towards them? So what are the decision responsibilities that need to kick in, to make sure that, as people are facing this, they are also able to deal with it?
Perhaps the departure point is what you also have been running for a while as leading oneself. Now, a good number of our leaders can hardly lead themselves and they want to lead 60 million. So I believe the starting point is let them understand that if you want to step onto the leadership platform, you had better be prepared. Be prepared to deal with complexity where there's interplay of economics and politics to start with. But you can overlay that with all manner of other factors as players. And unless you can deal with that complexity, we are going to have a big problem going forward. So I would plead with the leadership that whatever you do, if you want to lead, don't master a cluster of slogans and come and bamboozle me with that. Delve deep into understanding that leadership is a responsibility. Delve deep into understanding that as a leader, I have to be accountable. That delve deep into understanding that as a leader, I must actually stand to probity. And probity is, behaving in a manner that is beyond reproach. And then people tell me, you're too idealistic. But unless you set that ideal for leadership, you'll fall far short. So I would say, let that be the guiding. As a nation, you must have a northern star, our due north. But as corporations as well, we need to have that because we're huge players. And those who find themselves given the responsibility of being directors must also understand that they have a duty to work in a manner that, as I said earlier on, distinguish between profit and plunder, and choose responsible profitability. And where the national leadership is concerned, choose the path that is beneficial for the greater good.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Doc. Thank you so much. Gita, let's get to practical steps. How do we improve transparency?
We can replace the word AI in this discussion with any other critical pressing issue. And it comes back to what's the cultural context and the drivers and the climate within organizations when decisions are being made, and what are the incentives for behavior. And what I've seen with culture is that every single action, you can understand all behavior is rational if you understand the emotional context behind the behavior. And I think a persistent challenge in this regard is, I think, the way the modern workplace processes, systems, way of managing people, way of quantifying, measuring, performance managing, incentivizing. It's a fear-based ecosystem. Our modern workplace is it's a machine that produces shame. And from a sociological standpoint, the processes have been designed to pit people against each other, not to foster collaboration. Yeah. So now, to then say, let's helicopter in a really nuanced conversation about the future we want to create. Okay, that's great. Let's try that. But we need to have a real hard look at how come we only hear from certain voices all the time? How come leaders say one thing and do another? And corporate math, right? Why is it the corporate math always lands out on the side of the shareholder and not the stakeholder? So it's those kinds of things, the context in which we're having the conversations, we need to be, I think, a lot more honest and authentic about. What I've seen from leadership is leaders who haven't done the inner work, who haven't done the internal journey to really reconcile warring parts of themselves, right? That's that masculine, feminine thing in our psyche. Those are the leaders most susceptible to ethical breaches and integrity breaches, because ethics and integrity is actually a reflection of an inner integration. But I would say, maybe just in wrapping up this piece, I think for us as South Africans and on the continent, we have a unique relationship to the future that the West does not have. The way I understand that is the following way. The concept of the future as a dystopia that only exists in the West. That is not a concept of the future that exists in indigenous societies or exists on this continent, because our relationship to the future has always been this idea that it's a place we're going to create together. Always. So I think this idea of I'm thinking of Wakanda. I can't help it, right? It's a powerful mythical idea of Afrofuturism powered by technology that ensures societal and planetary well-being. We are, I think, the custodians of that narrative of the future. And I would love to see business leaders, boards, directors, and executives talking about this and saying we're not just going to ingest and consume what's coming from the West. And this dystopian idea that somehow machines are taking over, it's not going to happen. We're not absolving ourselves of accountability. We are accountable.
Awesome. No, thank you. Thank you, Gita. Thank you so much. AJ, I would love to have your concluding thoughts, especially around, Nani's pointed something very important, ChatGPT, garbage in, garbage out. With AI-generated insights, where do you draw the line between machine recommendations and human accountability? Where is that dance there?
I want to go back to my example earlier on, right?
Yeah.
In this legal case, right? Actually, the accountability needs to rest with the person arguing the matter, right? This is a professional. They get paid a fortune. They have a professional obligation to their client and to the courts in this country to not rely on an answer without checking it, right? So I'm not saying that you don't rely on ChatGPT. I think we're delusional if we think that we're not going to go to a doctor and that doctor doesn't have a ChatGPT open in front of them. I don't know if you've ever tried this. Like, I've taken scans and reports, stick it into ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT for a diagnosis. They'll give you a diagnosis. So by the time I get to my doctor, I have zero medical training whatsoever. Most of those terms are Latin to me because they are Latin. But the reality is that actually I now have the ability, I'm empowered to test, right? So I do think, and Nandi's right, we need to be teaching these kids what are the right questions to ask. But more importantly, we need to be teaching them not to accept the first answer. Absolutely. Okay?
Yes.
Because my brother did this exercise the other day, and Gita knows my brother well, right? A leading academic in the sphere of kind of apartheid and how to undo apartheid. And he asked my nephew asked ChatGPT to say, who are the leading scholars in the world on apartheid? And it's very interesting, the list that it produced us. And then you prompt it again. You say, they know, like, historically black academics on this list, right? Or black academics on this list. And they says, oh, yes, you're right. Here's a revised list, okay? So you need to, and wait, it gets better, right? You then say, okay, but, there's this little professor there called Dr. Lalu. He's written a number of books. And so how did you determine who are the leading scholars? Okay. Bear yourself to me. Okay? And then it's interesting the response that it gives you. It's exactly what Gita was alluding to earlier. It will never admit it's biased, it's wrong, that its first answer was, so I think what we do need to do is to prompt correctly, to interrogate the prompts that we're getting, to fact check, and to apply our own experience, knowledge, understanding, creativity, and so forth before we accept this as gospel truth. Because if we don't do that, it's a very dangerous spiral to the bottom.
Yeah.
And it's a spiral that I'm concerned we will be too late to arrest. And I want to just make one last concluding remark here. That I think, imagine if we built a large language model around the principles or constructs of Ubuntu, right? I think it would be way, way, way more powerful. If we think about the history on the African continent, if we think about the kind of stories that we grew up with, the folk tales and so forth, right? None of that is captured on the internet, by the way, or very little of it is. the indigenous histories of our people are not on the internet. But if we created that, and if we went through a process of actually digitizing our culture and our history in a responsible way, not in a way which, in how the West often portrays it, okay? I think we start to build something which is unique and different. And I think we build something which is this kind of utopian version of a Wakanda, right? Yeah. And so I do think, when I talk to politicians and and leaders in this country, we don't have this vision. We don't have this vision of saying, actually, we may not have invented it, but we can create it in our own version. And if we don't do that, we will forever be the consumers of this technology. Yeah. We will be the feeders into this technology, but never ever the owners of the technology. This technology will own us.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Ajay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Doc, let me give you the last word. As professionals are sitting here and their parents, we are parents. We are parents. We are, running businesses. We sit in corporate. What becomes your message to this generation that's raising the next generation around technology and where we should be in terms of our thinking?
Perhaps I have a bit of a duty because I'm kind of straddling eternity and the land of the living to kind of throw down the gauntlet to us as members of the intelligentsia. AI is something that perhaps we started growing with a little later, but the reality is something that has faced us for a while. But we are the intelligentsia. Now, as the intelligentsia, what are we going to do about the potential ravages of uncontrolled? We should be the controllers. The potential ravages of uncontrolled AI. What are we going to do about a youth that is preoccupied with sound bites from social media and don't delve deep into the kinds of things that develops the human brain? Sound bites. And they thrive on that. And a good number of those sound bites actually were put in there by non-thinkers who don't quite care about us and who don't care about posterity. The challenge is ours. We spoke earlier on about agency. Agency means we actually taking charge. And unless we take charge, those that have successfully elevated mediocrity to a status of virtue will continue to give us mediocre leadership, which I choose to call misleadership. So the challenge is ours. As members of the intelligentsia, our solutions, and we must be solutionists, our solutions are thought through solutions. You mentioned something that I've grappled with for the past 5 years or so. Don't take the first answer as the answer. We, as the current intelligentsia, must think and think again. We must think again, and think about thinking. And that the challenge is reflection, because the reflection leads to insight, which is deeper understanding. And insight informs foresight, compelling foresight. So that's my challenge to us as the intelligentsia.
Wow, thank you, Doc. Let me take this opportunity to thank our panelists, thank them for taking the time to be with us today, and also taking the risk to participate in this conversation, with us, a new entity that is still developing. But thank you so much for your love, for your support, and for the confidence that we've given us to be with us today. Can we give them a round of applause? Let me also thank you, colleagues who are here today, who have also taken the risk to come from different spaces, different locations to come and spend this evening. You could be doing different things. I think Netflix and chill is becoming the biggest alternative. You could be there, but you decided to be here today. So can you give yourself a round of applause? And our gratitude to you. I think my sense following this conversation is that AI is not the future, it's our reality. I think my takeout from today is how then do we apply ourselves towards it? How do we then become the decision makers who use AI, but then become the decision makers as opposed to being on the other end? I don't know how many times I have received proposals that you can tell this is written by AI. There was no one. They even left the markings, and you can tell that this is AI. And we need to apply it differently and use it as an enabler. I was excited today, by the way, that my ethical clearance for my master's thesis has been given. So I'm raising this because I think also in the field of academia, the usage of AI has actually become an ethics is now something that is questionable. Exactly. So let's rather use it ethically and let's push. But thank you so much. Have a great evening. We still have some drinks. Sorry. Oh, thanks to, so we still have some drinks, we still have some hors d'oeuvres, so for those who came late and didn't get, but a few people to thank as well. Our team that is here today, that has worked with us for the last few months to put together this event. Bradum's there on the technology, Lelomek events, my little sissy bully, who really was driving us. Tando and Tuxi for being there all the time and pushing us. Thank you so much. Even our accountant is here, so she will, I suppose, also tell whether we've used the money appropriately. But thank you to my wife, my baby Lynette there, who has also, been instrumental in this. Colleagues, thank you so much. Love you all. Namaste.